Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, please bear with me as I'm trying to get that closed captioning fixed here, but we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be the moderator and technical support for today's webinar. Today's topic is overhauling your mental health toolbox to cope with the impact of coronavirus pandemic. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders before we get started today. As a reminder, all participants on the call are in listen-only mode, and if you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post those in the chat or the Q&A, and we will facilitate them throughout and at the end of the webinar as they come in. We have some exciting engagement things that are going to be happening during this session, so we'll be participating a lot in the chat and facilitating those questions as they come in on the topics that our presenter will address today. Another reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and the presentation recording and materials from today will be up on our website as well as the Illinois WorkNet website within 48 hours. Momentarily, I will put the link in the chat where you can download the slide deck from today if you would like to follow along or have later access to it, and then you can access the recording within 48 hours of today's live session. And then tomorrow, each attendee will receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey asking you about today's webinar. If you could please provide us with feedback and suggestions you have to help improve upcoming webinars, our professional development team would greatly appreciate it. I'm actually going to put that same survey link that you will receive tomorrow in your follow-up email. I'll put that in the chat towards the end of the session. That way, if you would like to leave us feedback while the session is still fresh in your mind, you may do so. And then a reminder, if you have faulty internet connection or if you would prefer to call in, you can do so by using the original phone number and your original registration email sent to you by Zoom. And you can call in using your cell phone to provide you with that audio connection today. And with that, again, this is myself, Kirsten Bayer. And then I'm going to put up our beginning polls that we do every Wednesday webinar. So our first one is just, where are you joining us from today? So we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to answer this. So just, where is your local area? Okay. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So most of you are joining us from Chicago today, and the rest of you are sprinkled throughout the state. So welcome to all of my fellow Illinoisans. Okay, and then the next poll we want to launch is just, which partner do you best represent? So we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to answer this one. Okay. Oh, there we go. I got the closed captioning fixed for everyone who potentially could need that. So we will end this poll and then share the results. So it looks like most of you are joining us from Title I this afternoon, which is great. And we have a good portion of you from other RIO partners and stakeholders as well. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of this afternoon to spend with us. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to our presenter, Lolita Godbold, and she will take it over.
Good afternoon, and thank you for registering for this webinar. Though we have gathered for a very semi-interactive learning experience, I hope that is enjoyable, at least a little bit. And I just want to take the time to tell you again how much I appreciate you sharing this time with me today. My name is Lolita Godbold again. I am a MSW licensed clinical social worker. I currently serve as the Director of Field Education at Chicago State University, in the Department of Social Work. Part of our mission actually is to train social workers who would be trauma informed. So this presentation today fits nicely with the mission that we have at our university. So as you know, we've all gone through recently an event, and we're still going through this experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. So today, one of the objectives that we hope to address is that we want to define the types of trauma, and we want to understand the pandemic as a traumatic event. And at the end of this, we'd like to develop a plan to re-engage or engage familiar tools that you all already have for coping. So you won't leave here today necessarily with many new tools, although we got a couple, but really want you to re-engage things that help you to cope before this event that you no longer are using or have not been using as much during this event. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to take a minute if you have a pen and paper handy, not so much for taking notes, but there may be various points and times during this presentation where there's things that I just would like to know how you respond to. Okay, so let's get started. First thing I'd like for you to do on your own, because this will be helpful to you as we get back to overhauling your mental health toolbox. If you could take a moment and write down or list 6 things that you prioritized before the pandemic. 6 things that maybe it was a class, maybe there was a hobby, 6 things that you were really passionate about protecting time for, things that were very important to you. These 6 things most likely would fit into one of 9 various categories. And we're going to go over them in a second. We're going to look at them. And when we experience a traumatic event, it's not uncommon that there's a change in how we continue to use or interact or participate in those 6 things. And there probably is possibly more, but I'm just going to ask you for today to list 6 of them out. I hope you've had an opportunity to write your 6 down, and we're going to move on. So then on the next slide, let's look at the categories of those priorities. Well, the next one category. So there are 9 categories here: hygiene and appearance, sleep and relaxation, healthy leisure, healthy eating habits, exercise, inner peace and spirituality, self-improvement, health management, social, family, and group. So when you look at the 6 items that you wrote down, hopefully you will see those where they should have fit in one of these categories. So for the next part of this discussion, we're going to take a break because we're going to go into a little bit of talking about trauma and how you experience that. So I want you to be available for this discussion. I want you to be able to participate in a way that makes you comfortable. So I'm going to invite you to a place of relaxation. And I would like to say to you that this will be a tool. So take this next exercise that we're about to engage in and add it to your toolbox for later. So we are going to relax for a minute. And we're going to take about 3 minutes, maybe less, but this is more or less to relax you and to also teach you how, if you're not already familiar with really basic relaxation as a way to engage a contemplative practice, a mindfulness practice that can help you to cope with stress and trauma. And also you will find at the end of this presentation, a resource to visit a website with Michigan State University that actually will review for you how to do this deep breathing exercise. So on the next slide, you'll just see where it's asking you to relax. So if you are at home and you're at a desk or at a table, wherever you are, I'd like for you to take a moment, sit straight up in your chair if you can, relax, put your hands either in your lap, fold them at your side, wherever they're comfortable. Relax your shoulders and close your eyes. You're going to take a deep breath in from your belly, breathing in through your nose and blow slowly out through your mouth. Focus on your breathing. Breathe in again through your nose. Slowly breathe out through your mouth. Each time you inhale, try to inhale just a little deeper. Try to relax your body just a little more. Breathe in through your nose. Breathe out through your mouth. If you feel your mind wandering to things around you, focus on your breathing. Always focus back in on the breathing. Breathing one more time in, slowly through your mouth. Last time. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. If your eyes were closed, I'd like for you to open them slowly. The reason that we did that exercise at this point is because I wanted to make sure the next part of this presentation, where we're talking about things that might have been traumatic, that you are in a place to be able to receive the information. Kristen, if you can go to the definitions of trauma. So there are two definitions that I wanted to focus on when we're talking about trauma. One from the Oxford Dictionary, just standard, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And then the second one from the American Psychological Association, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, there's shock, denial, and then long-term emotions that we just can't predict. In some cases, flashback. The event can place a strain on our relationships. We can experience multiple physical symptoms. While these are normal, some people have a difficult time moving on with their lives. Single incident traumas, which I would put the COVID-19 pandemic in a single event trauma, though the duration of it has been long and will possibly continue. It was a single event for the most part. And with that, there might have been, the examples would be severe illness, diagnosis, or injury. There has been some loss for some, right? This is not the same as a mugging or a robbery. A move would be an example of a single traumatic event, losing a job, a motor vehicle accident. So, next slide. What happened on March 11th, 2020? On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared that this was now a pandemic. So they became deeply concerned at the alarming numbers of the spread and the severity. I don't know about any of you, but I could almost remember just before that date, we knew we were hearing a lot of conversations that was in the air that this thing was happening and it was coming. The numbers, we could see the numbers overseas and things were beginning to happen. And I remember that there was discussion about would we not be able to come to work anymore. And my initial reaction was one of that disbelief. I'm like, what are they talking about? I will be honest with you and say that initially I thought, well, if we have to go home, this will probably be like a snow day, right? We'll go home for a couple of days, maybe. But something happened on March 11th where we knew that that wasn't at all that's not what we were talking about. It wasn't a snow day. And we didn't know what to expect. So if you remember, I don't know how many of you end up working from home, but I can remember when I had to work from home, we made that determination, trying to figure out how to transition to work from home. What do I take? What am I going to need? Do I even have all the resources? How much? It was just the whole event of going home was traumatic for me. So on the next slide, I'm going to ask you to take a peek at how we might have been impacted by the pandemic. And there's a list of things. So this list that we have, I'm going to tell you, this was my own soft uh, qualitative research. And I enlisted the help of about 10 people, coworkers, family, friends, really random. And I asked them, send me a list, an exhaustive list of things that have happened to you throughout this pandemic. So if you take a look at this list, I'm just curious. I'm going to go through it. If there's anything in this list, respond in the chat if any of you all can relate to this, or if there's anything in here that you experience that you don't see here. So I just sort of compiled this list. Many people suffered the sudden change in employment, such as working from home or working part from home and part not. There were people who lost their jobs. There's people who had, of course, a loss of income, personal illness. Some had families and friends who became ill, whether due to the pandemic or not. Uh, Loss of a loved one due to the pandemic. Loss of a loved one during the pandemic. Coping with grief during the pandemic. Coping with illness during the pandemic. I see one in there. Cancellation of vaccines. Uh, I'm sorry, vacations, I'm sorry. Change of graduation plans. And after schools closing, remote learning. How many people lost? Oh, social isolation, wedding canceled, coping with world events. I love it. I love you all's responses. There was one response in there that I'm gonna Kirsten, can you read? There was one in there that actually is going to come up again in this conversation. Somebody I think I saw real quick in the chat about distrust.
Yes, they said distrust in the government, masks not needed, question mark.
Yeah,
Isolation, social isolation, working from home instead of the office was a big change. Those are all the comments you received.
thank you, thank you,
Birth
thank you.
birth of a child.
Yes, yes. So when these things happen to you during the course of something that's already, that just compounds this as a traumatic event. There was one person, actually two, and if you look at the last bullet point I have there, I added it. Only 2 out of 10 people noted it, but I noted it because it was really different than anything that I'd ever even considered. And it was coping with other world events and natural disasters during the pandemic. And so when I asked the two individuals who wrote that, what did that mean? Were there other things going on? And the first thing they said, well, you remember, if you all may have remembered, over the summer, there was a massive storm that knocked out power and resources, and people didn't have electricity for days. this summer in parts of Cook County, and I imagine other parts of the state as well. And so because of that, it impacted people who were already in this very feeling very isolated, and now I'm isolated and I don't have I have food in my house that I cannot eat, or so I did not consider that. The other person said to me, well, what about the fact that we actually went through a whole situation where there were protests in the streets and riots in the streets, and people lost access to the very basics, like being able to go to a pharmacy. Those were two things that I had not really considered when I set out to ask, tell me what's happened. Oh my gosh, you all have great things. I'm sorry, I'm really distracted by the chats because they're great. Um, can you read what some of the things that popped up in the chat, Kirsten, for me?
Yes, they said it was confusing because there was no leadership from the White House. In fact, the administration was not acting in a logical, scientific manner. Another person said there was mixed messages about the pandemic, like is it true or not? Is it a political divide? And then another person said constant disruption by president and ignoring scientific evidence of COVID and causing people to not worry about wearing masks.
Okay. Thank you all for sharing those things. I'd like for you to hold on to some of those things, if you will, some of those things that you thought when we went through that list. Because again, depending on how you felt going into this and throughout it, it does impact how we're going to talk about the importance of re-engaging that toolbox. Okay. So trauma reactions. So now here's what we're going to talk about: trauma reactions. There is two basic types of trauma reactions, right? And in general, if we had to categorize them. And those two types of trauma reactions are literally are immediate and delayed responses to trauma. COVID-19, for the most part, would be characterized as an existential type of a trauma. And when we think about that, an existential experience is one that impacts individuals in their experience of the families and communities in which we live and in the world. And a lot of what you all mentioned about distrust, a lot of what was said about how when the mixed messages about masks, that accentuates the fact that this very much was an existential type of a traumatic event that we experienced. So we're going to, in the next two slides, I am going to ask you, if you can, if you have pen and paper, take tick marks and write down, just for every time that we read one of these, if something resonates with you, make a tick mark. And we're going to poll you all in a couple of minutes. But looking at the immediate responses to trauma, immediate emotional reactions: sadness, helplessness, feeling unreal, feeling out of control, just absolutely out of control. You had no control over things like, shall I dare to say it, but people were feeling out of control about buying toilet paper, feeling overwhelmed. Immediate physical reactions. Maybe you couldn't sleep. Maybe you were having issues with nausea and distress, extreme fatigue or exhaustion. And sidebar, I'm going to say this about the physical reactions or that extreme fatigue. How many of you all, and this is a rhetorical question, know people that instantly went into the binge watching of various Netflix events at the beginning of this? Because they were just that exhausted. They just needed a way to check out. And maybe some of you all even resorted to that because there was a place of just numbness, and binge watching Netflix might have been a way for you to sort of manage that at that time. Immediate cognitive reactions: difficulty concentrating, just continuing thoughts about the event, replaying this over in your mind, because a lot of this was still related to that feeling of this is unreal. Strong identification with victims. people that you know that might have been ill during this time, people that you know might have had family members that became ill, maybe you became ill. But identification with victims, restlessness, sleep and appetite changes, increased use of alcohol, drugs, and or tobacco, withdrawal, apathy, immediate existential reactions. This again goes back to what we were speaking of before. So during this time, maybe you prayed more, restoration in your faith and goodness of others, looking to receive help from others, immediate disruption of life assumptions, fairness, safety, predictability of life. When immediate, and there's that type of a reaction is all of a sudden we no longer feel safe in our communities, which is what was described in the chat. You no longer trusted that the very communities that we lived in had the ability to support us and sustain us and to help us to move past this traumatic event. Next slide is about the delayed emotion responses. So delayed responses, some of them are going to be the same. Depression, mood swings, instability, anxiety, phobia, generalized anxiety, grief reactions, shame. I want to talk just a minute about that shame, because in the beginning, and even maybe even now, there were people that I am learning, and you probably are too, of people who actually might have contracted COVID-19 during this pandemic and felt embarrassed to even share it with anyone. There was shame associated with that. They didn't want people to shun them. And so there was that. Imagine being sick and afraid and needing to deal with shame at the same time. Delayed physical reactions, sleep disturbances again, nightmares, appetite, digestive changes, persistent fatigue. Delayed cognitive reactions, self-blame. That self-blame is attached to that shame. So one thing that I think that I have learned through this experience is a renewed consciousness about being able to support people by sometimes not asking the question. Do not ask people why or how they think they may have gotten COVID-19, because they may already be dealing with the idea of some self-blame. Preoccupation with the event, avoidance of event reminders, social relationship disturbances, decreased activity levels, delayed existential reactions, questioning, why me? Renewed faith, and a redefining meaning and importance of life. So now, take a moment and count how many tick marks and how many of these things might have resonated with you. And we're going to poll the group. Let's see what we have. So, how many of the examples of the responses were you personally able to identify with or experienced? 1 to 10 of them, 11 to 20, 20 or more, or none at all?
We're going to give everyone about a minute here to answer this one, since it's a little bit more reflective. Okay, here's the results.
Wow. So I think what's amazing is that no one said none. So that means we are all in agreement that we have been impacted. 60% of us have admit to at least 1 to 10 of those items resonating. 34% of us, 11 to 20, and 20 or more at 6%. When we question when I ask that question, um, about this is one of the things we're going to talk about is how we talked about again, how is it that our communities can support us as we go forward. So the next slide talks about the ecological model of psychological trauma. This is a very academic definition, but what I will say about it and what I want you to take away from that is that the ecological model of psychological trauma suggests that there are three components involved in how we experience a trauma, but one of the key components to resiliency at the end of the day is really about how society can count on one another to recover. How will my community be able to help me? Am I able to, in the beginning, how we struggled to even be able to get a test, remember? So in the beginning, we couldn't even get a test. Now we're moving to vaccine stage. Someone else mentioned masks. So again, that is what one of the key components to the ecological model of psychological trauma. So events as ecological threats, not only to the adaptive capacities of individuals, but also to the ability of human communities to foster health and resilience among the affected community members. Okay, so next slide, we're going to look at the things that we take as part of the ecological model. The three components that make up how we respond to a trauma is who we bring to the trauma, who we are before the trauma, the person. There are various things that impact who we are, of course. Age, level of stress prior to the event, your experience with coping to prior traumas, whether those experiences have yielded in you being able to cope well or not with that experience, exposure to trauma, and then your personality. The next component in that is the event itself. And that's on the next slide. So when we look at the event, and this event being one that the frequency we see was once, the severity devastating, the lives lost are more than we could have imagined, more than we could have ever imagined. And the duration is long. We're still dealing with this, and we really don't know how much longer we will continue to deal with this. We don't, science is still being developed, there are research efforts still being made. There are people who are still sick. There are people who are still getting sick. And then again, humiliation with the event. The next slide, the environment. The environment is the third component to how we experience or respond to a trauma. Your home, your school, the ability of, again, your support system to foster adaptive coping. And on the next slide, attitudes and understanding of providers and family members and friends. I was speaking to someone who actually contracted the virus in the early March of last year. And she'd seen her regular primary care physician, and she'd had some complications. And so she had to make a follow-up visit. Her doctor wasn't available. So she'd seen a different doctor, another doctor in the practice. And she said that she experienced such shame from the doctor. She felt so uncomfortable. She said, I just told the doctor, if you could quickly just see me, treat me, and allow me to leave because I am not feeling comfortable being here. So again, the environment, community values. Somebody mentioned again, values around how people felt about wearing masks, attitudes, culture, race, gender, political and economic factors. That was in the chat as well. So you can go ahead. You can go to the next slide. So here's the ecological model of psychological trauma again. And those are those three components. So we have the person, the event, and then the environment. Those things feed into how we then respond to the trauma. And from there, how do we move past it? Whether you have therapy or not, of course, I am a social worker, so I'm going to also always advocate for people to seek therapy if they feel that they need it. And sometimes if you're not sure if it's something that you could benefit from, you may want to seek it and try it to see if it helps you in your recovery process. But it's not necessary. So what I find very interesting about this model is that it's very honest with you, saying that there's the possibility that maybe you will try to recover from this and you won't. But for the purposes of discussion today, I don't really want to focus on the fact that we can't recover, because I'm assuming that we can, because you all already have a toolbox that we're going to reconstruct. We're going to put it back together, and you have been able to recover in the past in some very other ways in your life. So we're not assuming today anything but recovery. Okay. So let's look at this. Let's get started with rebuilding your toolbox. All right. So there's actually 5 steps that I want you to sort of think about that we're going to use to sort of overhaul this toolbox. You're going to first assess your tools using the wheel of life. You're going to second assess the barriers to utilizing your tools. Then we're going to do something kind of interesting, and that is we're going to take a break. Then we're going to recommit, and we're going to talk about how to protect those tools. So the next, let's go to step 1. Step 1 is where you're going to assess your tools. Okay, we're going to use this wheel of life on this. It is on the next slide. When you look at this wheel of life, I'm not sure how many of you may be familiar with this. You've probably seen it. These domains that are here, you can actually, you can change them. You can make it personal for you. You can add, you can take away. Typically, the way this tool is used is for you to assess how you're doing in the moment with these things. I want you to assess that, but we're going to do something a little different with this wheel. So from 1 to 10 on each of the domains that I'm going to list, I want you to think about how well you functioned in that domain prior to. These domains are actually your tools. These are your hammers, screwdrivers, and wrenches. These domains are your tools that helped you to cope. We're doing something a little bit different with this wheel. So if anybody has any questions about that, please feel free to ask. But at the end of the day, these tools are what we call purpose, and they're your joy. So having purpose, being able to tap into things that gave you a sense of accomplishment and joy are the things that helped you to cope before, and they are going to be the things that will help you cope moving forward and throughout your life. Okay, so we're going to just use these examples or these domains that are here for the sake of this discussion. Again, you can feel free to adapt these on your own when you're off of this call, or later on, you may want to change this. But again, from 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, we're going to go through these domains, and I'm going to ask you to think about how you used that tool before. And I'll give you examples as we go through it to help. So we'll start with business and career. Maybe before this, you were someone who actively participated on maybe a special work group on at your place of employment. Maybe you were striving for professional growth and development, and those are things that you enjoy doing. So those would be the things on a scale from 1 to 10. How engaged were you in those things before? How much did you find joy in actively participating in something at work, whether it was seeking promotion or working towards things that allowed you to feel successful or competent or experience a sense of accomplishment at work. Finances. Now, I know everybody on this that can hear my voice religiously spent time every month reviewing their finances and working on their financial portfolios, right? So, if that was something you enjoyed doing before, you had savings goals, you were working towards maybe buying something special, whatever it was. If this was a hobby maybe you had or a passion you had before, how important was it to you before? And list that from 1 to 10. How important was it before you? Your health. Maybe you had committed yourself to making sure that you were going to be very conscious about taking care of yourself and managing your health. Maybe you had a medication regimen that you said, I am going to be committed to taking my medication every day as I should. I am going to be committed to managing my health, eating right, and exercising. These were things that you actually enjoyed doing. You felt productive and it gave you a sense of accomplishment. Again, from 1 to 10, identify what how you feel as though you were before. You spent time with family and friends, and maybe you prioritize that. Your relationships with your family and friends was satisfying. You may have maybe you talked to your mother every day. Maybe you talked to a best friend every day, or you spent time with that person, you went to visit, those kinds of things. On a scale from 1 to 10, how effective were you using that as a tool to provide you a sense of purpose and joy? Romance and relationships, I put in the same category with friends. So that same energy that you would have put into your family and friends relationships, how much time did you devote to that? And was it fulfilling for you before the pandemic? And how you use that to allow you to feel fulfilled in your daily life. Personal growth. This is a broad one for me. It could mean anything. Maybe you were somebody who made every day. Maybe you meditated. Maybe you engaged in some type of contemplative practice. Maybe you were very engaged in affirmations, daily affirmations. Maybe you had a hobby that allowed you to pour into yourself in that way. Fun and recreation. Some people make sure that they prioritize that as their outlet. How have you and what were you before on a scale from 1 to 10 at utilizing that tool? Your physical environment. Are you enjoying your space? Were you enjoying your space? Your home. Your home is your refuge, your workspace. Whether you have an office, a desk, or a cube, maybe you don't have any of those, but how did you protect your space at work so that it was a place for you that could be a place of that you could retreat? Okay. Now that you've taken that inventory, I'm going to ask us to move to the second step. If you are not using those tools right now, why not? Just sit with that for a minute. Why not? So in the next slide, let's think of some why nots. Some of your why nots may sound like I can't, and I can't may be realistic. You can't. I don't want to. I don't have time. I don't know how. I don't know how to do that anymore. I don't even know how to re-engage. I don't know how. And what are the barriers? Your tool no longer works. Maybe it's broken or you don't feel like it's accessible. So let me give you an example of what I would mean. Let's say before the pandemic, you were focused on your health and you had decided you were going to engage in healthy eating and cooking, and you were very diligent about meal planning and prepping. You planned your meals and you cooked, maybe you cooked daily or you cooked for the week, but this was something that you enjoyed doing. Now, you either maybe you don't enjoy doing it anymore, you're not doing it anymore, or perhaps you're cooking different things. Maybe now you're cooking comfort food. So you changed you're not changed your meal plan maybe, and it's not the things that would necessarily meet that goal and bring you the same enjoyment as the healthy cooking options that you engaged in. And that's just an example. So the question would be, why aren't you anymore? And we're going to come back to that as an example as the why. Now, this is a pretty heavy idea, and I don't want to suggest to you that trying to figure out your why is going to be something you may necessarily be able to answer in 3 minutes that we were here on this in this session. So at that point, because I don't think it's going to be easy, I'm suggesting to you step 3. What's step 3? Step 3 is you're going to take a production break. Okay. And step 3 is you're going to go for the quick production win. These quick wins will help you to regain your confidence. But what are you going to do in step 3? You're going to step away from trying to figure out why. You're not going to try and address it for a minute. Now, you say, what are the quick wins? And I am going to tell you what the quick wins are. There are things that will bring you an immediate sense of gratification from accomplishing it. And one quick win might be cleaning a closet, organizing a drawer, something very quick that will say, I needed to do that. It was something you needed to do, and it's something you don't have to think much about doing. You can stop at any time to do it. So what I do, I just for fun, I would like it if you could just tell me if anybody in the chat can commit to a quick win. So please share a quick production win that you feel you can commit to immediately. This won't take the thought of the why. What's the one quick win? It's springtime, so you may even want to switch out spring to summer clothes. So this is your quick win. Yes. Kirsten, can you read some of the quick wins that people are willing to commit to?
Yes. Clean out a junk drawer in the kitchen, clean out winter clothes I didn't wear, clean out my closet, sort through clothes, donate items that I haven't been able to sell, clean my closet. Someone said even just going outside, clean out a shelf in my pantry.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I know that that may seem a little bit odd to be a step, but the reason why is that when things get to the point where you're overwhelmed with how do I get back this, and what I'm suggesting for you to do as far as rehauling this toolbox, it's not easy. So this will not only allow you to feel like you won something, it will help you to regain your confidence that you actually can get back to doing some things. And then the things that are in your toolbox will seem a little less intimidating to tackle. So step 4, we're going to make it a little hard again. We're going to go back. We've had the quick win. So we're going to go to step 4. Why is this important to me? Why were those things important to me in the first place? So that person that once had the healthy meal options, well, maybe it was important to me before because I had decided that I needed to recommit to my health. Maybe it was a conversation I had with my doctor. And so it was important because I needed to feel better physically. I needed to manage my weight. And so when you look at your why, if you cannot say or identify why you aren't doing something anymore, part of the recommitment phase is to remind yourself of why that tool was important to you in the first place. Okay. Though you may enjoy the cooking that you're now engaged in because you might be cooking cookies and cakes and pies, that might, but if those things take you away from your original why, we're asking you to recommit to your why. Step 5, easier said than done. I'm going to ask you to protect your tools, protect your time. Find it, make it, and protect it. If you're going to recommit to using the tool, you need to plan the time and the space to do so. And you'll have to protect it in that way. So I have a 3 minute, I think it's about 3 minutes of this TED Talk that I would like to share with you on your own. You may want to listen to the entire talk, but the part of it that I wanted you to hear is where she speaks about how you recommit to that time. So if you can go ahead, Kirsten, when you're ready.
And figure out a training plan and dig those shoes out of the back of the closet. And then, this is key. We treat our priorities as the equivalent of that broken water heater by putting them into our schedules first. And we do this by thinking through our weeks before we are in them. I find a really good time to do this is Friday afternoons. Friday afternoon is what an economist might call a low opportunity cost time. Most of us are not sitting there on Friday afternoon saying, I am excited to make progress toward my personal and professional priorities right now. But we are willing to think about what those should be. So take a little bit of time Friday afternoon, make yourself a 3-category priority list: career, relationships, self. Making a 3-category list reminds us that there should be something in all 3 categories. Career, we think about. Relationships, self, not so much. But anyway, just a short list, 2 to 3 items in each. Then look out over the whole of the next week and see where you can plan them in. Where you plan them in is up to you. And I know this is going to be more complicated for some people than others. I mean, some people's lives are just harder than others. It is not going to be easy to find time to take that poetry class if you are caring for multiple children on your own. I get that. And I don't want to minimize anyone's struggle, but I do think that the numbers I am about to tell you are empowering. There are 168 hours in a week. 24 times 7 is 168 hours. That is a lot of time. If you are working a full-time job, so 40 hours a week, sleeping 8 hours a night, so 56 hours a week, that leaves 72 hours for other things. That is a lot of time. You say you're working 50 hours a week, maybe a main job and a side hustle. Well, that leaves 62 hours for other things. You say you're working 60 hours. Well, that leaves 52 hours for other things. You say you're working more than 60 hours. Well, are you sure? There was once a study comparing people's estimated work weeks with time diaries. Found that people claiming 75+ hour work weeks were off by about 25 hours. You can guess in which direction, right? Anyway, in 168 hours a week, I think we can find time for what matters to you. If you want to spend more time with your kids, you want to study more for a test you're taking, you want to exercise for 3 hours and volunteer for 2, you can. And that's even if you're working way more than full-time hours. So we have plenty of time, which is great, because guess what? We don't even need that much time to do amazing things. But when most of us have bits of time, what do? Pull out the phone, right? Start deleting emails, or otherwise we're puttering around the house or watching TV. But small moments can have great power. You can use your bits of time for bits of joy. Maybe it's choosing to read something wonderful on the bus on the way to work. I know when I had a job that required 2 bus rides and a subway ride every morning, I used to go to the library on weekends to get stuff to read. Made the whole experience almost enjoyable. Breaks at work can be used for meditating or praying. If family dinner is out because of your crazy work schedule, maybe family breakfast could be a good substitute. It's about looking at the whole of one's time and seeing where the good stuff can go. I truly believe this. There is time. Even if we are busy, we have time for what matters. And when we focus on what matters, we can build the lives we want in the time we've got. Thank you.
Upwork has the world's largest network of proven.
Okay. Can I start back? Can I continue?
Yes.
Okay. The reason I wanted to show that to you all is because I know that if I look at my list of things in my toolbox, that I often will say, one of the barriers for me is time. So I just wanted to add that to you. But also, I want to challenge you to look back at that wheel and think of, this is not one of the steps. So you've gone through the 5 steps. So the next is what I call not a step, and it's the new tools. So if you will allow me to be very transparent with you, I am going to give you an example of self that hopefully you will be able to identify with. So prior to the pandemic, I had said to myself, I am going to start to get at least, if not monthly, goal would be twice a month, maybe monthly. I wanted to get a massage. I'm going to find the time. I am going to do this. I can do this for myself. And I am now saying to you that that's a new tool that I am committed to putting in my toolbox. It's something I should have done for myself before. But having gone through this experience of this pandemic, you start to reflect on the ways that you know that you need to be able to take care of yourself to cope. So one of the things that I don't want to do moving forward is to take for granted the tools that I already have, nor am I close to the idea of introducing new tools. So I encourage you, when you go back and you look at those domains, are there opportunities for you to uh, overhaul this toolbox by adding new tools to it? Maybe your toolbox has a hammer and you have a screwdriver, but maybe you should consider pliers or a set of Allen wrenches. Okay. As we're going to go to the next slide, I want to just recap with you. The COVID-19 pandemic for many was a psychological traumatic event. The ecological model of trauma suggests the person, the event, and the environment define your traumatic response. Recovery will therefore depend upon the very same, the person, the event, and the environment. Each person had a pre-existing set of tools in their toolbox before this event that could potentially provide coping mechanisms to manage current effects of trauma associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think we have time. I want to give you one more tool to possibly use. So in the beginning, we did the relaxation of that I would suggest that you could do at any time. This one is a body scan. I am going to share with you, I want you to look at this video, but I tell you how I use this one, and everybody has their own way. If I am working late at night and I have been at this desk since 8 and now it's 8, 9 o'clock in the evening, and I've worked all day sitting at this desk at home, because that's one of the drawbacks to working from home. You have no transition except dinner, but you don't have the luxury of the transition of walking from home to car, and it's been an interesting piece for me. So what I will find at the end of my day is that when I've sat here that long, that I am literally, my shoulders hurt. Sometimes my neck even hurts. So when I go to bed at night, I can perform a body scan lying down. The video that you're about to watch is going to take you through a body scan sitting. I encourage you to take this resource, use it again. You can play it while you're doing the scan, but I'd like for you to incorporate this into your toolbox, and maybe it's something you can use later or not, or share it with someone else. Okay, Kirsten, you can go ahead and cue it up.
Fly with Abel and Phi. Body scan meditation. Sit in a comfortable position and bring attention to your body. Close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. You can notice your body seated wherever you are, feeling the weight of your body on the chair or on the floor. Take a few deep breaths. Breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out through your mouth. 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out through your mouth. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now bring your attention to the top of your head. Sense this area. What do you feel? Stillness or a feeling running through your hair? Breathe. And as you breathe, relax the top of your head. Continue to breathe and move your attention to the side of your head in your ears. What do you sense? Do you hear anything? Now bring your attention to the neck and throat. Let them be soft. Relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. Smile softly and gently. Notice your back against the chair. Bring your attention into your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, let it soften. Take a breath. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Bring your attention to your legs and your feet. Feel your feet touching the ground and making a connection with it. Now notice your whole body present. Take one more breath. Be aware of your whole body as best you can. Take a breath. And then, when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Okay. Before I close for questions, I'm going to tell you that I rarely make it to my legs when I perform a body scan. Again, I told you I do it at night, lying down before I go to bed. So I'm usually asleep before I even get to my legs. So that is why I absolutely love it. It is definitely a great way to end the day for me. And it was a tool that I really wanted to share with you all. So again, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. And we can open for questions, I guess, at this point.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for a very engaging presentation. We had a couple more people comment. Someone said, when they were committing to doing one of the tasks that would have immediate satisfaction. They said shredding unwanted papers. I actually just did that. It's tax season, so that's kind of a good season to go through that.
Yes.
And we have a big safe at our house that we keep everything, all of our important documents in. So just cleaning that out was very, very satisfying. Um, Another attendee said, the no transition is the worst. Thank you for giving that a name for me. And then a lot of people have been saying, this has been great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was needed. This presentation was very well done, very realistic, and very obtainable, which I couldn't agree more. I did want to put in the chat for everyone that follow-up survey. If you have a moment and you would like to provide feedback right away, we would greatly appreciate it. And we can share that with our presenter today as well. I went ahead and put that survey in the chat. Along with it, you'll see the website where the recording will be housed. So if you need to make a note of that, that same information for the survey and the website will be in the follow-up email tomorrow that you will receive. So a lot of people are saying thank you. This presentation was very refreshing. Great tools to carry and use. Thank you. This has been great. Enjoyed the webinar. The instructor was awesome. So great feedback for you, Lilia.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your honesty and transparency. Excellent webinar. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide. So here are the references. So if you do want to download the slide deck, again, it was put in the chat at the beginning of the presentation. You can also find it on our website. It's up there already, the whole slide deck. It's in PDF form. But these links should still work for you if you want to find any of the resources and references that Lolita used for the presentation today. And then really quickly, I can't see the Q&A here. I have to stop sharing to see it. So I apologize for that. Someone asked, would you be able to share the title of the TED Talk so we can watch the entire video? I believe the TED Talk video is on that references page in the slide deck, correct?
Correct, it is.
And then we had another person who actually responded and said that they could relate to your personal narrative about your friend who went to the doctor. This attendee said, I likewise was completely invalidated and disrespected by a primary MD during a visit in February due to an illness that involved a very high fever for 4 days and then prolonged respiratory problems and what would be treated way differently with what we learned about COVID later on this past year. Are there any studies relating to what really happened? Because this has caused me to feel invalidated by my medical provider and lose my faith in medical providers. Personally, I am wondering why doctors did not report patients coming in with respiratory issues and high fevers earlier.
That is, I love the question. And at this point, I am not sure if there's any research, but I do believe that there will be research, because that, if nothing else, from a qualitative point of view, how many people actually had those issues prior to and are reporting that now. So I would, I'm going to challenge myself with your question to seek that information out, because at this point, I'm sure that people are starting to go back and look and see what was happening in January and February before March 11th, when it was noted as a pandemic. And I'm looking on this resources list and I don't see the TED Talk, but I can give you, I can send that to, I do have her name on that one slide. And so it's Laura Vandekamp, I believe, and I can send it to Kirsten, and Kirsten, I guess you can forward it when you send out additional information.
Yeah, I think I can put it in the chat right now.
Can you? Okay. Okay.
That way we can have quick access to it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Hold on one second, everyone.
Yeah, it's
Okay, here it is for everyone who would like to access that TED Talk and maybe even watch the whole thing. Should pop up. Yeah.
Yes.
So I just put it in the chat for everyone. Awesome. Okay. So I believe that is all we have. Let me pull this back up here. I don't see any other questions coming through or chats. So again, if you have a couple minutes right now, since we did end about 15 minutes earlier today, if you have a couple minutes to go ahead and take that follow-up survey that I put in the chat, we would greatly appreciate it. And then again, this session was being recorded the whole time. So if you know of a coworker or someone else that would benefit from watching this session, they can always access the recording, which will be available by Friday within 48 hours of today's live session. And with that, I'm going to close this out. Thank you so much to all of our attendees for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to our presenter, Lolita. And also thank you to Rena Bryson from our WIOA PD team who set this session up. I think it was an amazing session and very valuable for our attendees today. So thank you, everyone. You have a great rest of your Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.